got some questions from social media. You can follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Minimalists. You can follow Bex at Minimal Wellness on Instagram, and I think that's just about it. Instagram at Minimal Wellness. You can find her there. We have a question from Amelia on Instagram.
Just a heads up from the UK. The name of your first Patreon deal is an ableist slur. Now that you know it's offensive, are you going to change it?
Oh, interesting.
Let's talk about this. Okay. So I understand where you are coming from, Amelia, but we probably need to talk about a few things here. First off, you're offended, and it's not my job to unoffend you. In fact, let me be honest with you. Let me tell you a little secret. I can't offend you. I do not have the power to offend you. And if you're listening to this, you're watching this, I don't have the power to offend you either. Now, you can say you're offended by something that I say, something that TK says, something that Bex says, but we don't actually have that power to offend you. You offend yourself. And here's what I'll say about, we call all of our listeners simpletons, right? Now, that is not a ableist slur. I want to be clear about it. What the difference between a denotation and a connotation, right? A denotation is what a word means. Well, a simpleton is a foolish or gullible person. That's the definition of a simpleton. I happen to be both. Ryan and I picked simpletons a long time ago because he was the foolish one. I was the gullible one. And we picked simpleton to reclaim a word that had a pejorative meaning to it, not an ableist slur, but it had a pejorative meaning. But why did we do that? Let's talk about why someone might reappropriate a word that otherwise is considered a slur. Anybody know of any words that, I don't know, people have used as slurs and then some group of people reappropriates that word in a way that makes them feel connected with other people? Well, I do. There's quite a few. But one for us was simpleton because, well, it's a triple entendre. We're simple, and there's a ton of us now, simpleton, a ton of simple people. But also, what does it show? Ryan and I don't take ourselves very seriously, okay? We call our listeners simpletons because, by the way, they voted on it. We asked all of our listeners, hey, we're thinking of, what do we call our audience? Are you minimizers? Are you minimalists? Are you intentionalists? Are you essentialists? What do you want to be called? Minis? And they all voted overwhelmingly. Thousands of people voted for simpleton. And so we said, hey, this group of people, we're all acknowledging that we don't take ourselves seriously. We have to be able to talk about some things in a serious manner, but through levity. Because it's going to crush me if I have to pretend that all this materialism stuff, which is ruining a lot of lives, if I have to take it so seriously, like I'm a calculus textbook, I'm not going to be able to communicate with people in a way. Now, can that word be used as a slur? Sure. That's what connotation means. I don't use it that way. And Amelia, I hope you are not using the word that way as an ableist slur either, right? But there are other words. Bex and I used to live over here in Boys Town, right? And the word gay, it's in the Flintstones theme song. It means happy, right? But you can also use it as a pejorative. Oh, that's gay. Okay. Well, how are you using the word? Am I ever using the word simpleton to make fun of someone? No, of course not. I would never use that in a derogatory way. What we've done is we've reclaimed the word in a way that allows us to have fun, to be part of an in-group.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because this brings up so many issues. For one, it brings up the issue of being concerned with how I sound when I say it versus being concerned with what I am intending to convey. And if the problem is with how I sound when I say it, then we can have a conversation about my semantics. Should I use different language or whatever it may be to express myself? Or is the conversation about what I intend to mean? And we do live in a world now where you will get checked very fast at the level of how you sound when you say something without any examination being, performed with regards to what do you intend to convey. And I think this is tragic, and I do not accuse the questioner of doing this, but I think as a broader phenomenon, it's tragic when this particular thing I'm describing happens, because what happens a lot, especially online, is someone will say something and mean something benevolent, and another person will call them on it over the fact that they said it in a way that sounded bad. And now you have someone who, instead of being educated or instead of, being engaged intelligently, they're being buried. They're being piled on top of one another with criticism and so on. So I think that's an important distinction. Another thing too is, there are kind of like two levels of offensiveness with words. Like when you talk about, I don't have the power to offend you. I know exactly what you're saying, right? And at the end of the day, we are responsible for how we process our own thoughts and feelings. And we do have the power to neutralize other people's use of language, even when they do intend to offend us. The Black comedian Paul Mooney used to say, I say the N-word 1,000 times a day. It makes my teeth white. He took that word, and when he lived at a time when people would use it to hurt him, he snatched it away from them and say, I use it more than you, and in a way that makes me and my people laugh, right? And so that is a possibility. At the same time, as an educator, as a mentor, as an uncle, if I'm talking to my white godson, if I'm talking to some of my white nieces and nephews, and if I were to hear them say the N-word, I wouldn't cancel them. I wouldn't stop loving them. But I would seek to educate them on the history of that word and the power that it has to affect someone else. And if they were to say to me, hey, look, I ain't got the power to offend other people. Other people are responsible for how they process their feelings and emotions. The first thing I would say is like, man, like for my nephew or niece at your age, for you to be able to say that, first of all, that's profound. So give me a pound. However, there's more to the story than that, right?
Yeah.
And I would try to educate them on communicating in a way that is least likely to produce offense. But then you bring up the other issue, which is for every slur, for every negative word, like the N-word, like the B-word, there is a demographic of people who reclaim the power of an offensive term and use it internally. You can walk into a group of females and you'll hear ladies say to each other, what's up, B-word? You'll walk into a room full of Black dudes and they'll be like, what's up, my N-word? And for that crowd, it's a term of endearment, but it's still possible for people outside of that crowd to be offended by the fact that it is used at all, right? Yeah. It's possible for a guy to be like, well, what are these women doing calling each other that word? It's possible for a white person to be like, no, nobody should use the N-word. It's an ugly word, even though people in those demographics use it. And so a big part of discussions like this is, number one, making the distinction between what you intend to convey versus merely judging you on how you sound when you say it, but also asking, who is the audience here? Who is the audience? Are you speaking as part of a shared community which has a shared understanding? Or are you speaking to a broader world that understands the word in a particular way? And I think that's critical for navigating things like this. And so I understand what you're saying. I was curious because I wouldn't have imagined that question, and to hear you break down what simpletons means, why you chose it, how much the community loves it and how they chose it. It makes a lot of sense. I guess my question for you now is, what happens if the community says, hey, now that we think about it, we prefer minimizers instead? Would you change it then?
I would certainly consider it, especially with our private podcast audience. They're the ones who voted on it. So let us know in the comments. We're happy to take that under advisory because I'm always listening. Yeah. But just because someone has an opinion about something doesn't mean that it changes what the truth is about the way that it's been used. Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.